Murder in the fictional degree. That is the topic of today's video.
Boing boing.
Hey guys, it's Zuri and I'm back with another video. So, once upon a time, I came across a post on Pinterest. And basically, it's just a screenshot of a post made to a different website, probably Tumblr or something, but it was posted by somebody called Kill the Protagonist. That's their username. And this is what the post said. Kill off your main characters. Please. Not as a cheap ending or right at the beginning for shock value. Kill them in the middle and do it well. Leave every character reeling and unable to comprehend what happens next. Leave your antagonist without a solid enemy, wondering if they've gone too far. When you shatter the heart of a story, 1,000 tiny shards will split away and grow. Focus on the side characters, the supporting cast, the love interest. Think about how they would change, break, and reform. Think about the growth, the quiet moments of reflection and depth. You don't have to do it, but think about it. If your story starts with a single character, your story is weak. Kill the protagonist. Now, when I first read this post, my mind was blown because in most stories, death is kind of looming as a big what if thing to avoid, right? Your characters are fighting or doing whatever they're doing, and the main objective is to not die. And as a writer, you're basically kind of teasing the idea that death is looming in every corner. So this post basically being like, no, just kill your characters. It's not something that you see a lot. In the comment section, people were putting pictures of characters that have died to show that, hey, this does happen. And in addition to that, there were kind of two main ways to look at this that I realized people were kind of talking about. One way being that killing off your characters is angering for the audience. It makes the audience angry. One person straight up said, if I was reading a story and right halfway through the main character died, I'd be really angry. I would be too, because you're getting so emotionally attached to these characters. You want to see them succeed. You want to see them live a fulfilling life. And then to watch them just die a tragic death, it's really bad. And then to add on to that, people were like, yeah, it'll feel like there's no point to continuing because, you know, the main character is dead. What else is going to happen? On the flip side, you could say that would make you want to watch, you know, some more to see what will happen because you can't fathom what would happen now that the main character is dead. So it can be frustrating, but it could also be kind of interesting. The other main idea was that if you don't kill your main characters, there aren't any stakes. And I feel like this is more in reference to TV shows where your characters are constantly facing death and constantly evading death or constantly dying but then being brought back to life, which has its own like annoyance type deal. For example, one of my favorite TV shows, Lab Rats. Characters, you knew they weren't going to die. Mainly because it was a kids show. Sometimes you already know the characters aren't going to die based on, you know, the genre that you're watching or the style of TV show. You just know that's not going to happen. And on one hand, it gives you a sense of hope that things are going to be okay at the end of the day. But on the other hand, it makes things kind of predictable. And one person basically described it as there not being any stakes, right? The whole tension of the story is kind of gone because you know the characters are going to miraculously be okay in the end. When I reread the post, and I've read it several times because it's really short, but reading it a couple times, it kind of sounds like the OP, original poster, really wanted it to be more like a writing exercise rather than actual writing advice. So instead of saying, write your story so that the main character dies in the middle, it's more like imagine what would happen if your main character were to die, as an exercise to strengthen the characters, which I can see how that would be helpful if you want to have stronger secondary characters or kind of explore other things in your world and imagine how things would play out if your main character were to die. I think it's helpful as a writing exercise in that way. But there were other people saying in response to the section of the post that says if your story stops with one character, it's a weak story. Some people were saying that that's not true. Just because your story centers on one person doesn't mean that your story is weak. And I think that it depends on what you're going for as a writer. Like, if your main character is more of a lens for which the audience is to see a certain perspective or a certain idea, then it makes sense. Like, for example, one of my new favorite books, the last book that I read, The Midnight Library, it's written from the perspective of a woman named Nora, and you really don't know that much about anybody else. Like, of course, you know certain details. No one else's perspective is really explored in depth as much as hers is. And that is important because the story is about her and her mental health journey. So for that, it makes sense. Like, on the flip side, if you spend a lot of the story diving into secondary characters and, you know, introducing new characters that don't really play a main role in the plot, and then, you know, giving an entire backstory on them and, you know, giving them a lot of screen time or page time or whatever, it can make the story feel really not focused. It can make things just kind of all over the place and derail from the main plot. So I think that balance is important and perspective is important. I think that OP, that's just their opinion, that if your story stops with one character that it's weak. But I personally think it really depends on the type of story that you're going for. Like, if the story is about a main character and their best friend / sidekick that gets a lot of page time, it would make sense to, you know, focus on that side character a little. I think it's important to focus on the characters that the audience is going to be seeing a lot, and characters that don't necessarily get seen a lot, and, you know, they play an important role, but they're not, like, super, super important. You know, don't spend as much time on those, or at least, you know, give us enough so that we know them, but, like, you don't have to spend all this time diving into them. Personally, I don't think you have to kill the protagonist unless you really, really want to. I say when writing, go with your gut. Go where you feel like the story would naturally go. Don't feel like you have to kill the main character. Don't feel like you have to spend a whole lot of time on the side character's backstory. When you feel like you've written out or outlined everything and you feel like you have a good idea of where the story will go, then you can go back and strengthen characters and maybe imagine what would happen if your main character would die. If you think it would help your story, that's the other thing. If you think that imagining what would happen if your character dies would help the main story, do that. Or maybe it's not relevant to your story. Like, I feel like this is more for like action and adventure stories rather than like contemporary stories, or who knows. But yeah, I think this is more of a writing exercise. I've said that a couple times, but I feel like this is more of a writing exercise than like actual advice of what you should do in the story. At the end of the day, just go with your gut. It's your story, and of course, there will be times where you rewrite, reimagine, stuff like that. But don't feel obligated to do anything that is, you know, that feels uncomfortable for you and the characters that you're writing. Imagine if the new story trend, though, is the main characters dying. Like, you know, oftentimes you see a certain type of story gaining traction, like the enemies to lovers trope, or the best friends to lovers trope, like really romance tropes or anything like that. You see those types of stories really gaining popularity. What if the new popular thing is that the main character just dies halfway through? Like, not talking about the side characters, like the main character, like Leo from Lab Rats, or you know, Chase or Bree. Like, what are the like core characters? Imagine if that is the new trend. You know what? We canceled that. Nope. We I revoke that idea from being out there in the atmosphere. Nope. So yeah, that was interesting. If you have any thoughts about this, because I feel like this could be a whole deeper conversation, please let me know in the comment section. If you have other ideas for things that I should talk about or look at or review or whatever, also tell me in the comment section. Subscribe if you want to see more videos about Webtoon, story making, stuff like that, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye!